Good evening. Welcome to our first of 3 scheduled podcasts dedicated to recognizing the contributions of African American authors. Some of their works offer a glimpse at historical contributions of African American people, fictional stories, and poetry. This evening, our guest is Mr. Robert Harris. Bob, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I'm well. Thank you.
All right. Bob, we've done a little bit of research and we see that you are a 6-year veteran of the U.S. Army, a retired correctional officer, a proud member of the Buffalo Soldiers Motorcycle Club. I have a feeling we're going to hear a little bit about that tonight as well.
You will.
And you are also the author of Historical Moments, which we're going to get into in just a few moments. Bob's here to share with us about his background, his experiences, and most importantly, his book, again, Historical Moments, which is a compilation of military contributions of African Americans. Before we get into your book this evening, Bob, I think it's important to note that one of the major themes for this year at Jumoke Academy is recognizing the past and preparing the future. We believe that without moments such as this, we cannot learn, we cannot grow, we cannot move forward. And this is particularly important for our community, in addition to the scholars and the rest of our extended community that we're serving. So again, we appreciate you helping us move that cause forward. So Bob, tell us a little bit about yourself and your book, Historical Moments.
Yeah, maybe if I could take a personal moment. I'd like to thank my lovely wife, Florine.
You have to do that.
Of 25 years. My sons, who did the cover of the book, if I could just show that, he's an illustrator, and
Wonderful.
he takes all the credit for that. On a personal note, my grandson, Greg, he's graduating high school and should be starting college this year, and my beautiful daughter is getting married in March. So
wonderful.
that's
wonderful.
my
congratulations, and you have to acknowledge those who support you. All right.
And before we also get started, I'd also like to thank you, Ms. Monroe, as well as the Academy, for allowing me here today to promote my book. I thank you very much, and the Academy.
You're welcome.
For that.
You're welcome. All right. So again, let's jump right in. So Historical Moments, Military Contributions of African Americans. Just give us some opening remarks about your work.
The book started out as Historical Moments. As you stated, I am a member of the Buffalo Soldiers, and once a month we meet. And at every meeting, what I try to do is I try to research a little something on military history of an individual or a unit. And what I try to do is I try to present that to the club. I call these historical moments at every meeting. I've been doing this for quite some time, and over the years I had accumulated a number of these historical moments. And one of the brothers asked me, he said, well, Bob, why don't you try to put this in a book form? I was kind of hesitant at first, but I put it in a book form. I submitted it to a publishing house. They accepted it, and That was the genesis of the book.
Wow. How long did it take to compile this?
Going back and forth about 2 years.
About 2 years, okay.
About 2 years. My wife was a tremendous help on that, helping me put that all together, editing the book and putting illustrations as well as changing some of the text in the book. So she was a tremendous help on that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So before we get into a couple of your early stories or pieces here, you did mention the Buffalo Soldiers.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, what we need to know about the Buffalo Soldiers in terms of the historical significance.
The original Buffalo Soldiers was formed in 1866 by an act of Congress. Just after the Civil War, the army was depleted. You needed a large peacetime army, pardon me, to patrol the unruly South, to patrol the borders, to protect the settlers moving from the east to the west, as well as the construction of the railroad, because the railroad was moving west. So Congress enacted legislation that they call the Military Reorganization Act. In that act, what they did was they provided for the formation of 2 cavalry units and 4 infantry units consisting of Negro troops or black troops. The cavalry units were given the designation of the 9th and the 10th Cav, and the infantry units were given the designation of the 38th, 39th, 40th, and 41st Infantry. Now, in 1870, the 39th and the 41st Infantry were combined to make up the 24th Infantry, and the 39th and 41st were combined to make up the 25th Infantry Division. And those 2 units, the 24th and the 25th Infantry Division, are still active in today's Army. The 9th was formed in a place called Greensville, Louisiana, in in July of 1866, and the 10th was formed several months later in September at Fort Leavenworth.
Okay.
That's how they were formed.
So the Buffalo Soldiers were, from what I understand, I'm not a big history buff. I've learned a lot. But the Buffalo Soldiers were an all African American black
all
regiment.
African American, yeah. As a matter of fact, 1 out of every 5th trooper on the Western frontier was an African American.
Okay.
Their duties consisted of, as I said, guarding the wagon trains. They carried the mail longer than the Pony Express. They guarded the stagecoaches. They escorted surveyors. They built roads, bridges, telegraph lines. They even, in some cases, assisted with local law enforcement. The terms of enlistment was for 5 years. They received $13 a month. And they had a sense of independence that they didn't have as slaves. This is why the Army was so attractive to them, because the desertion rate for Buffalo Soldiers was something like 4%, whereas in the white units, it was, I think, 20 to 25% a desertion rate.
Okay. And so the Buffalo Soldiers were primarily instrumental during the Civil War. I think that's between 1861 to 1865.
Well, yeah, but they were not called Buffalo Soldiers at that time because they were just black troops. There were 179,000 African Americans fought in the Civil War. Of that number, 19 of them were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Wow.
Along with the what they call the Butler Medal. General Butler was a commander of black troops in the Civil War, and what he did was, with his own money, he commissioned a silver medal and dedicated that strictly to the Buffalo Soldiers, or not the Buffalo Soldiers, but to the black troops under his command. and a motto on the, I can't pronounce the Latin motto of it, but it basically said, freedom will be theirs by the sword. They had this medal, along with the Congressional Medal of Honor, as well as a number of citations that they got during the Civil War.
Oh, what an honor! What an honor!
Mm-hmm.
I hear you talk like you're saying he, and you're mentioning generals, and I read some of the compilations in your book, and I came across a very interesting page on page 37. If we can pull that up on page 37, there was the name of someone named Katherine Williams. What is the significance of Katherine Williams? Because typically, I don't want to. Well, typically when I think of soldiers, I really don't think of a lot of females in battle.
Yeah.
But it looks like this may be a female soldier.
It was. Kathy was the first and only female to become a Buffalo Soldier. The story on Kathy is that Kathy was born a slave in Missouri. Okay, and at the outbreak of the Civil War, she was, I believe, in Jefferson City, Missouri, when elements of the Union Army from Indiana, I think it was the 8th Infantry, they were passing through Missouri. When the Union soldiers were marching south, they were freeing the slaves. And those free slaves they call contraband. With the men, what they would do with the men, they would enlist the men in the service and have the men digging ditches, building fortifications and roads and all. With the women, what they do with the women, would they have them as cooks, working as nurses in the hospitals, tending the wounded, or just washing clothes. Now, Kathy, when they freed her, she traveled with the 8th Infantry for the entire duration of the war. Some even said that she was probably involved or had been at the Battle of Bull Run, okay, which is a real famous battle during the Civil War. When she was in Alabama, she came in contact with a union of black soldiers, because as I said, there were 179,000 black soldiers that fought in the Civil War. And they think that this might have given her the idea of becoming a soldier, because she was a very, very independent woman. At the end of the Civil War, along with a cousin and a friend, she wanted to join the Army. So what she did was she dressed in men's clothing, okay, and had one of these kippy hats and pulled it down over her eye and took the physical. Now, then physicals were not like they are today. Physical at that time, the only thing that the physician would do is he'd have you, show your teeth to make sure you had all your teeth and all your fingers.
I wish it was that simple.
But now, to do that, I mean, they did that because they were using these old muzzle-loading weapons, Springfield weapons. And your teeth had to be strong enough to bite off the patch with the black powder in it, pour it down the barrel of the gun, take a ball, a lead shot, put that down, take the ramrod, push that down in it, and fire the weapon. That was the reason for it. So, as I said, with a friend, she decided she wanted to be a soldier, a friend and a cousin. They were the only two people that knew about it. What happened was that she stayed in the Army. She was assigned to A Company of the 38th Infantry for 2 years, 1866 until 1868. In 1868, she was stationed at Fort Huachuca in Arizona, and there she contracted smallpox. Now, when they took her to a hospital or the dispensary and gave her a thorough examination, they said, wow, this can't be. And that's when they discovered that she was a woman and she was given a discharge.
Wow, that's a fascinating story, and that's just one of the stories that you can find and learn more about in the historical moments, military contributions of African Americans. Again, we are speaking with Robert Harris, the author of the book, and just learning a lot about some of the very ways that African Americans were instrumental, male and female, as we just found out, during the mid 1800s, early to mid 1800s, during the wartime. I want to just take a moment just to remind our audience that if there are questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat. We are monitoring those questions, and we'll read them as they come up, and we'll share them with you this evening, and try to answer as many as we can as they pop up. Okay. Now, again, your book is entitled Historical Moments, and it deals with some of the contributions, a lot of which we don't really know about, that African Americans made during military times, war times, particularly in the mid 1800s, early to mid 1800s. And I find it fascinating. I was looking at page 55 in your book, and it dealt with the 25th Infantry U.S. Bicycle Corps. I'm like, wait a minute, they rode bicycles in wartime? Tell us about that.
Well, here again, this is where the Buffalo Soldiers were first. General Nelson, this was in 1896, 97. General Nelson Miles had toyed with the idea of, he was the general of a lot of the Buffalo Soldiers, and he toyed with the idea of replacing a horse with a bicycle. So he contacted a lieutenant that was stationed at Fort Missoula, Montana, named was Moss, I believe his name, Lieutenant Moss, and he instructed Moss to create this unit of Buffalo Soldiers from the 25th, this bicycle unit is what they call them, or iron horses. What happened was that in June of 1896, after about 3 weeks of training, Lieutenant Moss took 8 Buffalo Soldiers on a short trip, bicycle trip, from Missoula, Montana to Yellowstone National Park, a distance of only 800 miles. That was a short trip.
Wow.
Later, what they wanted to do was they wanted to make a longer trip, so they decided that they would travel from Missoula, Montana, all the way to St. Louis, Missouri, a distance of almost 2,000 miles, 1,900 miles.
On a bicycle?
On a bicycle. They carried with them 50 pounds of equipment, in addition to the bike, the weight of the bike, as well as their weapons. It took them 34, 35 days to reach St. Louis. They traveled at 6.3 miles an hour, and they they went something like 55, 56 miles in a day. And keep in mind, there were no paved roads, so this was all over sandy hills, rocks, uphill, downhill, bad weather. It's just the conditions that they were traveling under were just unbelievable. But they did that on the bicycle, and that was the bicycle corps. Unfortunately, the Army never did adopt the bike, so they stuck with the horses.
Wonderful, thank you. So, Bob, before we continue, we do have a comment, a question here. It says, please talk about how we think about the displacement of the Native people and our role in that. There's a reasonable discussion around this that we probably should get into, and it'd be good for us to hear. So,
that's not in the book, but Buffalo Soldiers at the time were doing the job. You follow orders. When you're in the Army, you follow orders. There was a lot of intermingling, I should say, with the Buffalo Soldiers as well as the Native Americans or the Indians. A number of Buffalo Soldiers were discharged in the West and married Native Americans. The scouts for the Buffalo Soldiers were black Seminoles. These were these were ex-slaves from Georgia that had migrated to Florida and had intermarried with the Seminole Indians, and they were the scouts for the Buffalo Soldiers. But at that time, it was my opinion that they just did what they had to do. That's a part of American history. It might not be a pleasant part, the same thing as slavery, yeah, but it's a part of our history. And at this point in time, I don't know how you can make that adjustment or change history of something that happened 200-300 years ago.
Yes, yes. Great points, and I appreciate your perspective on that. And again, while there are some of these pieces that are not directly in the book, but if you follow history, you know kind of what was happening during the time frame, and so it's hard to or challenging sometimes to hear a perspective without recognizing that there's some other sides to the time period. So again, we thank you for that particular question that was posed. So going back to your book, I was looking on page 77, and there were some references there to different types of equipment, and when you were talking about the bicycle corps and what they were carrying on their bikes, I imagine during a time frame there were a lot of different types of equipment that had to be carried, whether they were on a bicycle or on a horse or however they travel. So I'm curious to know, what was it like? Did they have special clothing, special gear that they had to bring with them?
The weapons that they carried were Colt 45 revolvers. That was the weapon. The infantry carried the 1863, I'm not quite sure the date on the nomenclature, Springfield rifle. The cavalry carried the 1873 carbine. They also carried sabers that was mounted on the saddle, the McClellan saddle that they wore. Uniforms were made of wool, blue, sort of navy blue, heavy wool overcoat. The shirt was of cotton up under that, and they wore these wool riding breeches that was like a powder blue. For a private, there was no stripes on it, but as you achieve rank, they would put a stripe on the side of your trousers. For a corporal, the stripe might have been, say, 2 inches. A sergeant, you had to replace that with a larger stripe of, say, 3 to 4 inches. So as you advanced in rank, the stripe on the side of your riding breeches grew wider.
Okay, I didn't know that. I've seen those stripes.
Yeah.
I never knew the significance of them. So
yeah, if you see a private has no stripes, and you only get a stripe if you're a corporal, and that's about, I think, about 2 inches.
Okay. Yeah. And I imagine that the climate that was pretty rough during that time too. And I noticed, and we have another question here. We're going to get to that question in just a moment. I noticed that page 78, there's a soldier there wearing was referred to as a buffalo robe.
Yeah.
And so it's not a typical robe of what we would think of today.
Yeah.
Looks pretty looks pretty good. I mean, I know some people that might wear this today. It looks pretty fashionable. Any comments on that?
Yeah, it was only issued during the wintertime. It was not a part of their clothing issue. This robe was issued in the wintertime for the soldiers. But if I may, just kind of digress just a little bit. We've spoken, pardon me, and we talked about the name Buffalo Soldier. I'd like to tell you how they got the name.
That's actually what the next question was. So that's perfect.
Well, they got the name Buffalo Soldiers from the Indians. And as the story goes, it was 1867, and there was a private by the name of John Randall. Randall was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which at that time was what they called Indian Territory. Now, Randall was given the assignment to escort 2 white surveyors in to what they call Indian Territory, when they were attacked by a war party of Cheyenne warriors. Now, keep in mind, this is the first time that the Plains Indians had came in contact with the black man, and we were strange-looking creatures to them. The 2 surveyors were killed in the initial attack, but Randall, even though he had received several wounds, managed to fight off and hold off the Indians until he got help from a nearby mining camp. Now, when the miners came to rescue Randall, naturally the Indians took flight, leaving several dead and wounded Indians. And it wasn't too long after that engagement that the Cheyenne started to spread the word, hey look, we're fighting a new, strange-looking soldier. This soldier, he's not like the white soldier. This soldier, his hair is really matted, you know, and woolly, just like the head of the buffalo. His skin is brown, just like the buffalo. And he's got dark, piercing eyes, just like the buffalo. And even though you wound him, he's wounded, he would fight like a wounded buffalo. So as a sign of respect for this new, strange-looking soldier, this adversary, at first they were calling them wild buffaloes, later to be called buffalo soldiers. Well, there are 2 words in the language of the Lakota Sioux. The words are tatanka, akishita.
Say that again.
Tatanka,
Tatanka. Oh,
buffalo, akishita.
Akishita.
Akishita, which basically means the soldier who looks like a buffalo.
Okay.
That's how they got the name
wow.
of buffalo soldiers.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
I'm not a big historian, but I am aware of the Battle of San Juan Hill. And I think there's someone here, they've either read your book or they're familiar with a lot of what you're talking about. But that was actually going to be the next point I wanted to talk about, the Battle of San Juan Hill. If you could speak to that a little bit, what is the significance of it? We don't have a photo of that queued up tonight, but if you can talk about the Battle of San Juan Hill.
Yeah, San Juan Hill was really a good battle in the history of Buffalo Soldiers, whereby they got absolutely little or no credit at all. Usually when you think of San Juan Hill, you think of Teddy Roosevelt charging up San Juan Hill. But when you actually read the accounts of the battle, it gives a different light. Not to say that Roosevelt was not there and participated in the battle, but the accounts of the battle, it shows a different light. Now, Roosevelt, first of all, at the time, he was the Undersecretary of the Navy. So what he did, he had the pistol belonging to the captain of the Maine. So, you know, the cry was, remember the Maine, because it was sunk in Havana Harbor. The actual charge that day, on that particular day, there were 3 engagements. There was the Battle of El Carney, took place earlier that morning. There was the Battle of San Juan Heights. Now, San Juan Heights consisted of Kettle Hill and San Juan Hill. Now, Kettle Hill was so named because the Cubans used to process sugar in huge black kettles up there. Roosevelt participated in the Battle of El Carney as well as Kettle Hill. But the initial battle of charging up San Juan Hill was due to a white lieutenant by the name of Julius Ord. Now, Ord was with the 6th Infantry, a white unit. However, he was in charge of Buffalo Soldiers. Ord had gone to Schaefer, General Schaefer, and told him that he wanted to lead the charge of San Juan Hill. Ord had told a friend also, before he came to Cuba, that he would come back from Cuba either a colonel or a corpse. Unfortunately, he came back as a corpse because he was like in the mode of a gung-ho John Wayne type individual. He stood up, the American forces taking heavy fire from the Cubans. He stood up and said, come on, man, we can't stay here. So boom, he led the charge up San Juan Hill, leading Buffalo soldiers. Okay, Roosevelt, who had taken Kettle Hill, as well as participated in the Battle of El Caney, heard the commotion and joined the fight. Now, when they reached the height of San Juan Hill, all these American forces, they took a panoramic shot, and that's in the book. They took a panoramic shot of all the American forces on top, victorious force on top of the hill.
Yes.
There were white units from the 6th to 12th, the 1st Infantry. There were black units from the 9th, the 10th, the 24th, 25th, and Roosevelt and the Rough Riders in the center under the American flag. Okay? That was the panoramic shot. The only picture that came back to the newspapers in the States had these units cropped out,
Yes.
and Roosevelt and the Rough Riders under the American flag atop of San Juan Hill.
Left out.
Yeah, and that was because Roosevelt had with him a gentleman by the name of Ernie Davis. Davis was a war correspondent, a friend of Roosevelt, and an honorary Rough Rider. So everything that came back from Cuba showed Roosevelt in a favorable light. Roosevelt did this, Roosevelt did that, Roosevelt did this, Roosevelt did that. Davis was also instrumental in Roosevelt's campaign to become president of the United States. He was also instrumental in that.
It's hard to listen to this and refrain from political commentary, but again, the significance of what you just shared shows the importance of us passing down these stories and historical significant events so that
if I may, just
Sure,
one other thing on Roosevelt, and this is not to knock Roosevelt.
Yeah.
He's a great president and a great war hero. So I'm not really knocking Roosevelt. But Roosevelt, when the Rough Riders first came to Cuba, when they first arrived in Cuba, Roosevelt was not the commander of the Rough Riders. Roosevelt was second in command. The commander of the Rough Riders was a colonel, a full-bird colonel by the name of Leonard Wood. Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where I took basic training,
Yes.
is named in his honor. Okay? Just before the battle, a shrewd politician somehow, because just before the Battle of San Juan Hill, Colonel Leonard Wood was promoted to the rank of Brigadier General,
yes,
which left his second in command to lead the troops up San Juan Hill.
so that's how it happened.
So how is that possible?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Roosevelt wasn't even scheduled to lead the troops. It was Colonel Woods.
Colonel Woods.
But you know, we all know generals don't lead battles. You know,
That is true.
So Roosevelt, the job fell to Roosevelt to lead the troops up San Juan Hill.
So you heard it here tonight, all right? So we can help to.
And here again, that's not to knock Roosevelt. 'Cause
No, we're not knocking anyone's
I'm just saying
accomplishments,
he
but
was-
again, just giving a wider picture
Yeah, just-
of that time frame,
you know.
and what was actually happening. So we appreciate that. Thank you. So another comment and question that came in, it says, is it true that Custer refused to fight with the Buffalo Soldiers?
That's true. Yes.
Why?
Custer-
And so what was the deal? Why?
Well, he didn't. He thought blacks were inferior. He thought that they would run. He thought that they were cowards, despite the fact that 25 or 26 of them had been awarded the Medal of Honor. He just thought that they were inferior. And so he refused to have them in his unit. However, there was one incident where a black man served in the 7th Cavalry. And that was Lieutenant Charles Young. Young was the third African American to graduate from the Military Academy at West Point in 1889. Young was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma with the 10th Cavalry, Buffalo Soldiers. At that time, the 7th Cavalry was stationed at Fort Huachuca in Arizona. I'm sorry, not Huachuca, it was Fort Apache, I'm sorry. Fort Apache, Arizona is where the 7th Cavalry was stationed. Now, there was a lieutenant, a first lieutenant in the 7th Cavalry by the name of William Baldwin. Baldwin decided to resign his commission, which is what he did. Now, military protocol is that the next second lieutenant in line should be promoted to the rank of first lieutenant, which was Charles Young, okay? Young, Custer's men, or the 7th Cavalry, they couldn't deny him the promotion, so Young was promoted to first lieutenant in the 7th Cavalry. However, he was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He commanded black troops in Oklahoma. He only appeared on the roster for 1 year of the 7th Cavalry. So they did that, well, that was done because it didn't want African Americans to be over commanding white troops. But there was one, that was Charles Young, that served only on the roster of the 7th Cavalry under General Custer. And when we spoke of the Bicycle Corps going from Missoula to St. Louis, they passed the Wounded Knee, or not Wounded Knee, but the Battle of the Bighorn, Little Bighorn. They passed that monument and paid homage to to the soldiers who had been killed there. But one of the soldiers, one of the Buffalo soldiers, had said that Custer would not have us in his unit, and considering what happened to him, that might have been a good thing.
Yeah. So Bob, before we go to some other questions, we have a couple more in here. I'm just curious, what impact are you hoping to have by, you've written this book, this compilation. You are a wonderful historian. I'm enjoying listening to you. I'm learning a lot. Some of these stories I have heard because I've been to your presentation. I interact with you. But I truly find it fascinating. But I'm wondering, what is the impact that you're hoping to have? Who are you hoping to impact?
I'd like to, if I may, just to the younger generation mainly, but just to everyone in general. And it doesn't matter, black, white, brown, red, or yellow. I just want American people to know that there's a lot more to our history and the contributions that we've made, the military sacrifices that we have made, in defending the country. And I just not part of the story, the entire story. One good example was in the Second World War. There was a lieutenant by the name of John R. Fox. Fox was a forward observer for the 92nd Buffalo Division in Italy. They were in a small town in Italy, and the Germans were overrunning the town. So the American forces had to make what we in civilian life would call a retreat. But military terms, it was a strategic withdrawal. Withdrawal. Yeah. So Fox, being a forward observer, artillery observer, calling in fire, he was calling in artillery rounds to cover the American forces that was pulling out of the town. Okay. The dispatcher at the fire control center was telling them, the rounds are getting too close. You got to pull out of there. Fox kept saying, no, fire, 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 fire. Okay? Now, the last command that the dispatcher heard was, fire it. Okay? when the American forces retook the town, they found the dead body of Fox in the middle of 100 dead German soldiers. He called in the artillery round on his own position. You know, he was awarded posthumously the Congressional Medal of Honor, and one of the another big reward that he received was that the toy company Hasbro, in their G.I. Joe series.
Yes, I remember those.
Yeah, they made a figurine of G.I. Joe figurine of Fox in a kneeling position, calling in on a military telephone, calling in artillery fire.
Yes.
That was in 2005. You know, so as I say, examples like that, that the contributions and the sacrifices that we've made, I just want people to know that we did a heck of a lot more than digging ditches and working as a cook on a ship. Or something.
Yes,
We've
absolutely.
done a heck of a lot more than that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one other point I'd like you to speak on before we go to this next question, and we're going to be wrapping up here in just a couple of minutes. So if you have a question, you want to get it in, so we have just a few more minutes and we're going to wrap up. But in your book, you have a piece where you connect to Connecticut. Somehow there was some research or some compilation that you made a connection to.
Oh, yeah.
Our contributions as African American soldiers to
Yeah.
Connecticut. Can you speak on that?
The 29th Infantry.
Yes.
29th Infantry, the governor of Connecticut, the name escapes me now, but what he did was he saw that the 54th Infantry up in Mass was such a success that he decided that he wanted to create a unit of African Americans here in Connecticut, and that was the 29th Infantry. And when they left for the war in the year escapes me, maybe 1863. 1863. That when they left for the war, Frederick Douglass was there down, I think it was in New Haven, to see them off and to wish them well. You know, so he, the governor created that, Governor Connecticut at that time created, and it was the 29th, and some of those soldiers are buried in a cemetery on Main Street.
Yes.
Main Street. Some are buried there, and I think there's a few, along with members of the 54th, they're buried at the military cemetery in, I think it's Windsor, up in Windsor. There's a military cemetery there.
Yes.
Yeah, there's members of the 54th as well as the 29th buried there, along with on a cemetery on Main Street, North Main Street.
Yeah, and that 29th Infantry is called the 29th Colored Infantry.
Colored Infantry.
That's what
yeah,
they
most
refer to.
units
Yeah.
were at that time. They were given that designation, colored. In fact, when you go to Arlington, you'll see a certain section, because even though we fought and died for the country, we were not allowed to be buried alongside of white soldiers. There's just one section that's, pardon me, section off for the burial of black troops, and you can tell that they're blacks because you'll see that colored designation on the tombstone.
And I appreciate you highlighting this for us because, you know, again, for a non-historian like myself, you know, when I think about wars and African American involvement, and you know, a lot of times I don't really think about soldiers being up here in the north, African American soldiers, that is, and you know, that history is here, very prevalent and right in our backyard.
Oh, yeah.
And so for us to be aware of it, maybe, you know, take a field trip over to one of the sites and
North
read
Main Street
some
of the military cemetery in Windsor.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can see so many of the soldiers that have sacrificed for us, and again, read up and learn more about their contributions. So looks like we have one final question here, and if I can go back to it, And yes, someone's bringing us back to the Buffalo Soldiers again, so we'll go back there again. So why is the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers relevant today, and what should folks born in 2000, 2010, the 2000s, etc., take from or connect with today?
The courage that they had, the sacrifices that they made, the contributions that they made, not only to the nation as a whole, but to themselves. This, I think, is something that we all can take pride in, regardless of our color. You know, whether you're black, white, brown, it doesn't really matter. Just to have the courage, the conviction that these men had, considering the things that they went through, you know, and to still stand up and be tall. I think we all can take a lesson from that. You know, just use these men as an example. And, you know, I want to have strength enough, you know, to be able to make a positive contribution, not only to myself, but to my community. And if I could just leave one word with anyone, is that when we look at history, let's look at it as a whole. Let's take the negative as well as the positive thing and try to apply that to today, you know. And we all make mistakes, you know, and that's the only way you're going to learn.
True.
The problem is you don't make the same mistake again. And what you do is you just progress. You just go, you know, shake it off and go on and move on. You know, and look at some of the things that happened in the past. Try to apply that to today's world. See the situation we're in. I think it was Malcolm X or Marcus that once said that we have to realize our past to know our situation we're in today, so we can prepare for the future.
Wise words, words of wisdom, and we certainly do appreciate you reminding us that there's certainly so much we can learn from the past, so not to repeat it, right? Very wise words and reminders. So your book, Historical Moments, Military Contributions of African Americans, it's available. I do have someone in the chat that is very interested in learning about where they could actually purchase your book. And while before you tell us about where they can purchase the book, I will say that if you are interested in receiving a complimentary copy, I have a few copies. I'm not going to tell you how many I have, but I have a few. If you're interested, put your name and email in the chat. Tell us you're interested. Put your name and email in there, and we're going to enter you into a raffle. And if you're one of the lucky ones, we will certainly contact you via email. Actually, I think I have about 10 copies here that we're going to make available. And I don't know, Bob, I don't know if you autographed them or not, but before you leave, we're going to have you autograph them.
I'd be honored. I'd be honored.
We'd appreciate that, and we'll make them available. And for the rest of the folks, because we had quite a few folks on tonight. Some of the people have already dropped off, but for the rest of the individuals who are interested, where could they get a copy of the book?
Barnes and Nobles or Amazon.com. That's where they're sold. So you could go on Amazon.com or purchase it at Barnes and Nobles.
Okay, so Barnes and Nobles, bookstore, and or Amazon.com. So again, if you're interested in receiving a complimentary autographed copy, please just drop your name and email in the chat, or can send me a direct message, and we'd be more than happy to get a complimentary copy to you. If you don't want to put your information in the chat, you can send me a direct email at monroet@jumokeacademy.org. monroet@jumokeacademy.org. And Bob, again, before we wrap up, we have one other question here. It says, is the Black Panther patch related to a modern day contribution? I'm not familiar with the Black Panther patch, so.
The Black the Black Panther, pardon me, the Black Panther patch was the motto of the 761st All-Black Tank Battalion. If you saw the movie Patton with George C. Scott,
Yes.
at the opening speech, when he made that speech, he was making it to the 761st Black Panthers. And their patch is that of the head of a Black Panther with the words, "Come out fighting." "Come out fighting" was a quote from Joe Louis. Joe Louis was a Black Panther along with Jackie Robinson. They were part of the tank battalion.
Yes.
When asked, because Smelling beat Joe Louis in that first fight, and people were asking Louis, how are you going to fight Smelling the second time around or in the rematch? He said, "I'm going to come out fighting." And so they picked that up. So yeah, the Black Panther patch was the motto in the association of the 761st Tank Battalion.
Okay.
You know, they also led Patton's army, the 3rd Army. They was a part of the lead element going up to Bastogne in Patton's march across Europe. If I could have a moment to a quick story.
Yep.
A quick story would be the Black Panthers, the Tank Battalion. They were in support of the 26th Infantry, which was a white unit. A platoon of the 26th, they were en route to Bastogne. The 26th, I think it was a company or platoon, they were pinned down by heavy German machine gun fire. When they called for support, they saw these 3 Sherman tanks coming down the road. Sherman tanks came up, destroyed the machine gun nest, okay? This white soldier from the 26th, they're running towards the tanks. He ran towards the tanks, you know, to thank the tankers for saving him. He said, when the hatch popped open, he said there was his face as black as the ace of spades. Popped out of the hatch and said, "Y'all boys need some help?" He said, "You know, we got black tankers? What?" He said, "But hey,
Big surprise.
he said you could have kissed him because they saved it." But
Excellent story. Excellent story to end on. Excellent. Well, Bob, it's been wonderful having you this evening. I feel like I've gone to class and I've learned. I'm ready to take the test. I'm sure I'll do well. But this has been truly informative, and we're just so happy to have had you. We got to have you come back. I imagine there's more stories that you can share with us, and a lot of what you talked about is in the book tonight, and a lot of the other pieces are just from your own historical research and background. And so I imagine that we probably have some faculty and staff that would love to have you come and speak to scholars, some of our scholars, either if not in person, even by remote platforms as well. So we want to extend an open invitation to you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't just make this I guess public service announcement. We are not wearing our masks tonight, but we are sitting behind protective glass here, so you can't really see it if you're looking on the screen, but you just heard me tap on it. So we are being COVID-19 safe here with our mitigation pieces in place. So I wanted to make that public service announcement. All right. So I want to make sure we're keeping everybody safe. So thank you again very much. We appreciate you. And any final words from you?
Well, no, it was just my honor. I thank you. I thank you and the Academy for allowing me here just to express my opinion as well as promote the book. I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And again, I want to shout out to the Jumoke Academy IT department. Thank you guys for a wonderful job that you've done, as well as to some of our district leadership who has also helped and been instrumental in helping tonight to happen. Please tune in next Thursday. We have yet our second author series we'll continue Mr. Kenneth Williams. He'll be here talking about 2 of his publications, and then the following week we will have our 3rd and final author, Principal Nikhil Reed, one of our very own principals, will be sharing her work with us as well. Again, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing everybody back. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.